we're all hearing about climate change pretty much constantly. But what does it actually mean when we say a company is tackling its carbon footprint? Well, it all starts with understanding greenhouse gases and, maybe more importantly, a surprisingly straightforward way to measure them. So let's dive in and break it all down. So just think about any company for a second. When we talk about its carbon footprint, where do those emissions truly come from? Is it just, the smoke coming from a factory chimney, the electricity they buy to keep the lights on, or is there a much, much bigger piece of the story that's kind of hidden? That's the exact question we're going to unpack. To get to that answer, we got to start with the absolute basics. The easiest way to think about greenhouse gases is like a blanket that's wrapped around the Earth. It traps the sun's heat, which, hey, is essential for life. But what happens when that blanket starts getting a little too thick? Well, that's the core of the problem we're all facing. Okay, so what is a greenhouse gas, or GHG? In simple terms, it's any gas that absorbs the sun's energy and then shoots it back out, trapping that heat inside our atmosphere. That's the greenhouse effect right there. And you guessed it, as these gases pile up, the planet's temperature just keeps ticking upwards. So which specific gases are we actually talking about here? To get everybody on the same page, the international community had to come together and create a definitive list. This was an absolutely critical step, right? It turned this huge, vague global problem into something we could actually measure. Back in 1997, the Kyoto Protocol pointed the finger at 6 main offenders. Of course, you've got the big one, carbon dioxide, from burning fossil fuels. But the list also includes methane, nitrous oxide, and this whole family of really potent man-made gases called fluorinated gases. You could say this became the world's first most wanted list for climate action. But that list wasn't the final word on the matter. Science never really stands still. As our technology got better and we could measure the atmosphere with more precision, we realized there was another major player that had been kind of flying under the radar. And that gas is nitrogen trifluoride, or NF3. It was added to the official list, which just goes to show you this is an evolving science. So the big takeaway here is pretty clear. We now have a scientifically solid, globally recognized list of gases that we need to target. Okay, so we've got our list of gases. Great. But how does any organization, a company, a city, you name it, actually measure its own share of the problem? This is where the Greenhouse Gas Protocol's framework comes into play. It's actually kind of elegant. It breaks down all emissions into 3 simple categories called scopes. This framework gives us a complete map of an organization's climate impact. You've got Scope 1, which covers direct emissions. Scope 2 is for the energy you buy. And then Scope 3, Scope 3 is everything else. This simple 3-scope system is now the global standard. Let's dig into each one. Scope 1 is by far the easiest one to get your head around. These are the emissions you create directly, on-site. Think about the fuel you burn in company vehicles, or the natural gas that's piped into your building for heat. It's right there, and it's under your direct control. Simple enough. Now, Scope 2 is one step removed. These emissions aren't happening at your facility, but they are happening because of you. Every time you flip on a light switch, there's a power plant somewhere that's creating emissions on your behalf. Scope 2 is all about taking responsibility for that purchased energy. And then there's Scope 3. And folks, this is the big one. This is the whole shebang. It covers all the other indirect emissions across your entire value chain. We're talking about the emissions from your suppliers, from your employees' business travel, from shipping your products, and even from how your customers use those products. It's the full life cycle. So those are the definitions. But how do you actually go about calculating these scopes? Because the process itself really shows you why this framework is so important. You can really see how the complexity builds with each step. For Scope 1, you're basically just tracking your fuel receipts. For Scope 2, you're looking at your electricity bills and public data about the grid. But Scope 3? Whoa, that requires a huge effort. You have to collect data from your entire network of partners. And as you can probably guess, that calculation process reveals the single biggest obstacle in all of carbon accounting, what I like to call the Great Data Challenge. I mean, the difference is just night and day. Scopes 1 and 2 are pretty manageable because they use internal data a company already has, like those fuel receipts and utility bills. But Scope 3 is a whole different beast. It relies completely on data from other companies who may or may not even be tracking it themselves. So here's the bottom line on why Scope 3 is so tough. It's data you don't own and you don't control.
It's often inconsistent, it's rarely transparent, and it forces companies to rely on a lot of estimates. But here's the real kicker. For most companies, this hardest to measure category is also by far their largest source of emissions.
But, and this is a big but, despite all these challenges, this simple act of trying to measure this stuff is transformative. It turns a vague goal like, let's go green, into a concrete, actionable plan. It's the crucial first step from just having an ambition to actually making an impact.
Really, it all boils down to that old saying, you can't manage what you don't measure. The scope framework, for all its challenges, gives us the essential map. It's what allows any organization to truly understand its climate impact and finally begin the real work of reducing it. And that leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? This framework gives us the power to see our footprint clearly, moving us out of the dark and into a place of awareness. But the journey is really just beginning. Now that we can actually measure our impact, the real challenge is, how do we manage it?